Hey y'all, welcome. Let me add Instagram in. How's it going for you? If you're watching the replay, comment, let me know you're watching the replay. Hi, so happy to be with you today. Let me see, I think I almost got this. There we go, Instagram. Hello there. All right, let me put these screens side by side so I can chat with everybody. All right, who's here? Let me know who's here. Let me know what you're doing, how you're doing. Hello, there's some folks on Instagram. SJJ Concierge Service, Jesse Glasspool, Aminak, good to see you guys. Whoever is on Facebook and Instagram, I'm glad to see, or Facebook and YouTube, let me know. Type a little comment to say hi. Let me know what you're watching from. What did you have for breakfast today? I'm curious. I had, so Cara Furman, who is the daughter of Dr. Furman, who is the creator of the Eat to Live diet, she posts about what she eats. And recently she posted about how she was having she loves toast, different types of toast. And I've always watched her do that. And I think I kind of avoided toast for a while because toast used to be my kryptonite food. I would eat, a whole loaf at a time and that kind of a thing. Hey, Laura from Chicago, glad to see you. And Marilyn from Pennsylvania. Who else is here? Let me know. And so I saw her post, and actually I started working on this. She was posting about this a while back too, but I started working on it from a post of hers about 6 months ago when it was just the, peanut butter banana kind of toast. And so I want to say that my issue with toast was always that if I looked at a plate that had one piece of toast on it, I would always be like, that's not enough food, right? And I would avoid it because I'd want to eat more than just one piece. And if I ate two, well, I might as well have 3 or 4, right? And that was always my pattern. So I started doing some work on this in the last 6 months and going, well, what if one piece is enough? And really what the work that I had to do was find out what I meant by enough, right? How much is enough food? And today we're going to be talking about fast food in general. But I think there's something to be said for what do we believe enough to be? And so I started experimenting with, well, I wonder if enough could be just one piece of toast or a small meal, like folks that go to these gourmet restaurants and they get these tiny little portions and you're like, well, you got to go out to eat after you go out to eat there because you won't get enough food, right? So the idea of what is a portion and what is satisfying. So I started messing with that and I found that one piece of toast with some good stuff on it, whether it's avocado or banana, whatever, peanut butter, something like that, was actually enough to get me through quite a while, 2, 3, 4 hours, depending, especially if I would have something like sparkling water with it or a kombucha or something. So I started to realize, wow, one piece of toast could be a meal. Do you ever struggle with that? How much is a meal or portion size? Let me know in the comment section what you think about that, if you ever have any struggles with that. Okay, so that's what I had this morning was a piece of toast. It was a piece of Dave's Killer Bread with some peanut butter and half a banana from the other day that was super ripe. But then I don't know, it was weird. It wasn't very sweet. So I put a little bit of date syrup on and some hemp seeds and it was delicious and really just the right amount of food. I don't feel full at all. I feel satisfied, which was nice. Okay. So let's get into what we're going to talk about today. If you're watching the replay, comment and let me know you're watching the replay. Hello. And let me know who's here. Where else are you watching from? Okay, so update on the business. We have secured the best domain name in the world. I'm so excited. I'm not sure if I told you, but it's called howtostopbingeeating.com. It's the one that I wanted forever. And I was going with howtostopbingeeatingforever.com because that was the only was available. And it just so happened that howtostopbingeeating.com became available last week. So I bought it and that's what we're going with, which means another delay on trying to get everything sorted, by the way, with the podcast and all that. But I promise I will start doing that soon as we can get all that sorted. It's just a bunch of work that mainly my IT gal, Michelle, hey Michelle, has to do. Okay, so that's going to be really exciting, but just bear with us. Now let's talk about our subject for today, which is how to stop binge eating even when you're, maybe you still want to have fast food or still enjoying fast food. Okay. So Laura says, oh, good for breakfast. So Laura says, today and every day I had 2 cups of overnight oats with 2 cups of strawberries and blueberries. I've had this every day for 3 months. It's a late and large breakfast, but keeps me full until early dinner. Awesome. It's a great portion size if you're trying to do intermittent fasting to keep you through to dinner. Really good. Good. Yeah, I used to always do either oatmeal or smoothies, and I think I just burned myself out. And so recently I've been really switching it up a little bit. And yeah, so the toast has made it into my repertoire. What else are you guys eating lately? How are you doing? Okay, so let's talk a little bit about fast food. Now, of course, it's a very controversial subject, right? Because if we're trying to eat healthier, we definitely want to steer away from fast food as much as we can. But I think that there's a spectrum of fast food as well, right? Even in a single restaurant, there's sort of a spectrum of not as healthy to healthy type choices, right? We can always find some healthier choices at a fast food place, but I'm not even talking about that today. I'm not even talking about choosing the healthiest fast food on the menu. I'm talking about, let's say you are already eating fast food several times a week and you feel like you're having troubles because you're still binging. Now, I'm going to define binging. The way I define binging is to pain, right? So it's a level of uncomfortably full to painfully full, right? You get to this point where all of a sudden, ooh, it hurts. I shouldn't have done that. It's not just uncomfortable. Now it actually hurts. That's how I sort of define binging. And the amount of times that we do that per day, per week, per month, per year kind of determines how far along we are in our binging journey, so to speak. I don't have a lot of people on here now, but does anyone resonate with the idea of binging? Like, is that something that you do, or do you more get to the uncomfortable level? Let me know in the comment section. What is some of your eating habits like? So now there's another interesting part of binging that I want to describe. And many people don't even know about this if they're not a true binger. And I'll explain what that is. So binging carries with it a thought or a belief that one can't stop, right? It's like, now that I've started, or, what an example of mine is, thinking about what Laura just said, having oatmeal for breakfast. If I happen to make oatmeal ahead of time and put it in the fridge, I had a belief that carbs were super addictive for me and I couldn't stay away from them. So if I would see some oatmeal in the fridge, I would think, yes, if I see that, I can't stop. If I start to eat it, I have to eat the whole thing, which is why the bread thing came in for me, right? Because when I would see a loaf of bread, if I would give in to having some, which was almost, all the time when we had bread, it would start off with just bread and butter, right? And toasted bread and butter. And I would just keep going. And I remember specifically having a habit like that in college. And I would get white bread and it was just I don't know, it was like drinking water. I wasn't even tasting it. I would just eat the whole loaf, right? Okay, yeah. So Laura says, yes, I can't stop. I'm shoving another chip or cookie or pita in my mouth before I'm done chewing the last bite. More and more and more. And that's interesting. It is that idea of you're not even tasting it. You're more doing, it's like you're just trying to create a feeling with the food, right? Like you're trying to go off somewhere and not be there, right? And before you know it, half the loaf is gone or all the loaf is gone. So my technique for that time period in my life, which I would say is probably, all my life, but then once I found the Eat to Live lifestyle, it was probably more 6 to 12 months into it that I would go back to some binging habits. And if it wasn't bread, because then my technique was just get it out of the house, right? Don't have the bread around. We didn't buy anything. Like, our house was a fortress. We had nothing that could be construed in any way. I wouldn't even buy bean pasta. This is when bean pasta started to become popular. I wouldn't even buy that. I wouldn't make oatmeal in any quantity. I would never eat oatmeal because I felt like I was just perpetuating that addiction. And so that wasn't the answer. That only perpetuated my addiction, actually, was saying I couldn't have it. And Darlene, so you're mentioning bread raises your insulin, which causes you to get hungry. I agree with this, that there's some truth to that. But also, I think the bigger part of this is thinking that you can't resist that food. And that's what I was trying to say about being a binger, that the actual issue with binging isn't being around these foods. The actual issue is that you truly believe that you couldn't stop once you started. Okay. So for me, believing that because that oatmeal was in the fridge, I wouldn't be able to stop. So here's the way I kind of illustrate, or I want to kind of teach you a little bit about the way that these thoughts go. So you have some thoughts, maybe they came up from a commercial you saw, or from something someone else used to do, or maybe a childhood habit that you had. Like, I remember my parents didn't really make dinner when we were teenagers, and so I was left to my own devices, which is a bad idea, because I used to have, like, this sounds totally nuts when I think about it now, but I was just so into carbs at the time. And I remember I would make rice-a-roni, the San Francisco treat. And then I would put it on white bread and have it as a sandwich. And I would eat that all the time, macaroni and cheese, these kinds of things. This is what was readily available for me. So those became my habits. So the habits start, and you start to have some thoughts about them, like, oh, these are so delicious. These are so wonderful. I want more, blah, blah, blah. The more you repeat those thoughts, we say that repeated thoughts become beliefs. Okay, so when you have a thought over and over again, you have a belief. Oh, this is so good. I can't stop. I love this so much. I really want more. And then what happens is, as you repeat beliefs over and over again, you start thinking, yes, this is who I am. I'm the kind of person who loves carbs. I'm the kind of person who can't stop. And then it turns into an identity or a philosophy. This is who you think you are. And you think it's really embedded in you, and it's something about you. Also, if you hear things like bread raises your insulin level, which causes you to get hungry, you don't have any way around this. It's not going to change. If you're going to be around carbs, you're going to eat them, and you're going to eat them all. So I see this as a spectrum of kind of what this is a spectrum of empowerment, or we'll say disempowerment, actually. So here's where we start out as a kid, as a toddler, fully empowered. Like, if someone gives us a food and we don't want it, we just push it away, right? And we have good signals about that stuff because we don't have anything to mess that up yet. But as we start growing older and older and having more exposure to these foods, and also increasing these beliefs about ourselves, we start to feel more and more disempowered. And we start to believe empowered. And we start to believe more and more that these foods are addictive, that there's something wrong with us, that we can't stop once we start. And these beliefs become, the insulin thing. Oh, it's a losing game. These foods are everywhere. Life is social. I can't stop. We start to have these beliefs, identities, become identities and philosophies. And when it's to this point, this is when we actually have trouble. This is when binging sets in, guys. Because if you feel that you can't stop, you won't, right? It's that simple sentence, that quote from Henry Ford: if you think you can or you think you can't, you're right. The issue was always, okay, but how do I change those beliefs then, right? And that's the work here. So I'm going to disagree with you here, Darlene. Thoughts are very important. You are right. Being a massive addictive eater, I have learned that eating foods that don't spike your insulin levels keeps you in control. Yes, but it's an artificial control. Okay. Back in the day when I was binging on, peanut butter and dates, and I would get really creative in my house, like making stuff up. I learned how to make like flaxseed spatzo, which is like a German pasta, from craving one time. What I realized was the insulin thing is only part of the equation, and the thought part is actually the bigger one. Okay. Now, it's absolutely true that if you eat less and less of those foods, it will make it a little bit easier, but that's actually not what we want. We don't want it to be easier because we have removed those foods. That's not that's not the end goal here. The end goal to stop binging forever is to stop believing that those foods are addictive. I know this is really controversial, and you're just going to hear me say this over and over and over again. These foods are not as addictive as you think they are, and they are not as addictive as everyone else is saying they are. I don't care if you see, a CAT scan or an MRI that shows how much your brain lights up compared to heroin and sugar, whatever. I don't care about that stuff. I know from working with dozens and dozens of clients and having been a binge eater, like a binge eater before, but being cured now, these foods are not as addictive as you think. The issue is that we're actually believing we don't have power when our insulin spikes, which is a silly notion. Of course we have power. The only issue here is that we are only responding to the craving side of our brain. We're not using the prefrontal cortex. So for instance, Darlene, if you were about to eat something, right? You finish a meal and you have a craving for something. And then all of a sudden you get a phone call, maybe a loved one that you know is in town and they want to see you right now because they're about to get on a plane or whatever. You would drop everything and you would go see that loved one. The craving would disappear as you've changed your mind, right? So just because your insulin is spiked, when you have a different thought that's, oh my gosh, I get to go see this person, I got to go now, this is my last chance, that craving will disappear. What this proves is that the insulin is not as important as we think. The time that's the hardest is when we don't have anything to do, when our mind is unoccupied, right? And we have time to listen to our cravings and listen to this part of our brain wreaking havoc. But if we can get good at strengthening the prefrontal cortex, which is the rational side of the brain, which says, of course, just because there's oatmeal in front of me doesn't mean I need to eat it, or just because there's a cookie in front of me doesn't mean I need to eat it. If we get better and better and better at that belief system, that's when the whole thing shifts. And it doesn't matter what we eat or when we eat it or how we eat it. It's not going to be addictive in the way we did. Okay. So suspend your disbelief. This is actually how it works. It really is mainly this part because, and we know this because I explained this in my, I think it's the first podcast that I'm putting out. When we are as far as being a binge eater, so say we're over here and we feel like we really can't stop. We believe that we're a binge eater now. I'm a binge eater kind of a thing. We think that when we get around these foods, we're not going to be able to stop. But it is precisely that belief that's making us feel disempowered. And I know that's tricky because it's like, how do you get out of that? Well, that's what I teach people how to do is how do you get out of that belief system and move on and be peaceful about food, whether there's cookies right in your face every single day or not, right? That's the true goal here is not to like rid your house of all this stuff. There's so many people nowadays that say things like, if it's in your house, it's in your mouth. It is not true. That's so disempowering. We all have way more power than that. Okay. So let's talk about how fast food comes in here. So we're not actually talking about the merits of fast food health-wise or anything like that. We're just talking about, let's say you eat fast food now and it's something that feels hard for you to give up. Well, it's actually interesting that we can stop binging while still eating fast food. And what's even more interesting about that is that it doesn't matter what the quality of the fast food is, and I want to define fast food also in that it doesn't even have to be from a restaurant, fast casual, whatever, place like Taco Bell or whatever. It could just be processed foods from the middle of the grocery store, all the processed foods. I mean, as bad as Twinkies, right? Or Hostess cupcakes or Oreo cookies or Doritos, things like this. It could be that bad of fast food. You know what I mean? Like that processed is what I mean. We can stop binging even if we're eating those foods. I'm going to explain how. So for those of you who are watching and are feeling very maybe triggered by what I'm saying or in disbelief of what I'm saying, that's totally okay. Just stick with me. I will keep brainwashing you to the point where you're ready to try these things and you'll see that they actually work. Okay. So here's one of the first steps that we do, and this is actually the first part of my program. When I put someone to a program, whether it's a private coaching program or a group coaching program, The main thing that we do in the very beginning is we start taking an inventory of what we've eaten recently, like the last 14 days, something like that, okay? So I might have someone just write that down, just sort of like take a few notes, right? So I was coaching someone the other day and they were talking about, they had some ice cream, they had some like frozen dinners, like the lean cuisine stuff. They had some yogurt. They had some chips. I'm going to make up some of this. I can't remember all of it, but there was really no vegetables except for the ones that were in the frozen dinner, which was fine. I think there was some cereal here. And there was probably like 10 things on the list as we kind of looked through this last week to find out what this person was eating, right? So we make this big list. Now, of course, this person wants to eat salads and smoothies all the time, right? That's what this person would desire to eat if they had a choice. However, at this point in this person's life, they don't have a choice because this is where they are. This is what they're going to. So the first thing that we want to do, and what I would do with someone is we write down these foods. We go, what are the things that we went to when we were craving? What are the things that we gave in and ate when we were craving? Write all of it down and be honest about it. Don't push some stuff aside thinking, oh, I should be eating this, so I'm going to put this on the list. No. The first thing that I do with people is have them start to plan what they're going to eat tomorrow. Okay, now you've heard this a million times from people, this idea of planning, okay? My planning is different than what you've probably heard before. So when I mean plan, I mean start where you are. Don't start where you want to be or where you think you should be or where so-and-so said you should be. Don't start there because you won't be able to pull it off. Now, I'm not saying this to like demean you or degrade you or anything like that. I'm just saying let's be realistic, okay? That's the word that's important here is being realistic. Being realistic for right now. This does not mean that it's not going to change because it will. But this is the path to getting to salads all the time, okay? Trust me. So here's what happens. You start planning, but you plan realistically, meaning you actually plan the foods that you're already overeating on, or you're already binging on, or you're already going to when you feel like you have no control, okay? So what we would do is we would set up, we would just do like one day, 24-hour plan and be like, okay, what am I going to eat tomorrow? We would take a day that felt really great to us. Like maybe it was last Wednesday or something. We go, what did I eat last Wednesday? I got to have this. Then we would plan it for the next day. Same quantities, same foods, everything. Okay, here's why we do this. The reason that we start planning is that when we start planning exactly what we're already eating, it makes the experience of eating those foods 1,000 times different. Okay, it feels completely different when you go to eat a food that's maybe not the best food on the list, right? But like, let's say you plan ice cream for the evening, just like you ate it last week. You plan it, and then when it comes up, number one, the whole day you get to be looking forward to having the ice cream. Okay, that's number one. It's a different feeling. Looking forward instead of trying to push away and say, oh, I'm not having it, right? Then what happens is when you get to go eat it, you get to fully enjoy it instead of eating it and feeling guilty. Now, this takes some work because we still have in our brain those thoughts, oh, I shouldn't be eating this, blah, 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 blah. You know, I should be eating healthy or whatever. So all I say is let's just go from can't and shouldn't let's go from here, which is where we start. Then we start planning what we have, and let's go to plan and can. How do we do that? So first of all, we just actually plan and we go, okay, I'm going to have this tomorrow. And then we work on our brain. Then we, throughout the next 24 hours, we're like, I can have this. I was assigned to do this. This is okay. I'm doing it. Listen, I would have been eating it anyways because I had it last week, so I can have it. You're going to have it anyway because it's the food that you end up going to anyway, right? So instead of saying I shouldn't, how about we just say can? You get to believe whatever you want about that food, ice cream. But if you're going to have it anyway, why don't we just say can? Okay? Now, once we've said I can have it, that experience of eating that food, even the first time, is completely different than the last time you had it. And this is where I want you to trust me and just jump in and try it. Because if you actually plan those binge foods, binging is going to feel so much less satisfying. It will feel like, oh, well, if I can binge, why would I have that much? Right? If I can have that food, why would I eat that much? Now, this might take some time. For most people, it'll take less than a week. So usually what I'll say is if you feel like you have a kryptonite food that you can't stop eating. Now, this is where the fast food comes in, right? Let's say you're eating a ton of fast food because you're so busy and you don't care and you don't have time and you just keep going to those foods and that's all it is, right? That's okay. Let's plan it now. So we look at like how many times a week am I having Taco Bell, or how many times a week am I having Jack in the Box, or whatever it is, McDonald's, whatever. And we're going to have it anyway. So now let's just plan it. Okay. Let's plan to have exactly what we were having before. When you change the experience of having a fast food, whether that's a processed food from the grocery store, it's a food at a party, or it's a fast food that you get, just because you're starving and you don't have time to plan, think about it or whatever. You change the experience of it. And when you change the experience of eating those foods, you no longer feel out of control when you eat them. Now you feel in control when you eat them. And when you feel in control, you will automatically eat less. Now, let's say you've done this 3, 4, 5 days in a row where you keep planning the same things. I bet it's usually after day 4, day 5, something like that, that food starts to become way less interesting when you've actually planned it. Okay. And over time, we keep doing this work. And so we go from here, planning and can have it, to hold on. If I can have it, do I actually want it? Because now if you've planned it and it's okay for you to have it, now your prefrontal cortex has time to think about it and go, I actually don't like having 3 tacos at once. I'm just going to have 2 this time. And maybe I'll get a salad with it or whatever. This process, I promise you, this process will fix the whole thing over time. By planning things in advance, you're using your prefrontal cortex instead of that automatic craving side of your brain. And you start to teach that craving side of your brain that we actually want to use logic instead of emotion. And this is why I promise you these foods are not as addictive as you think they are, because you've just never used this part of your brain in this way before. Okay. Now, when we have removed the can't and shouldn't completely, any food is fine. You can have any food. You will automatically choose foods based on how they make you feel physically. Now, I don't mean if I keep eating this for the next 10 years, I'm going to get diabetes or something. I don't mean that long-term way off thinking. That's just fear-based. It's not possible to use that 100% of the time. But what we can get used to using is the rationale over how that food actually makes us feel. Okay, so after we've binged on a ton of that food, how do we feel? When we say, I like a food, or I love a food, let's say we say, I love Taco Bell. We think at the time, before we've done this work, we believe this sentence to be true. You could fill in cookies or cake or anything else. It might be, steak. I don't care. Doesn't matter what the food is. But I love such and such food, XYZ, right? Before you start doing this work, you actually believe that that's true. I really do love that food. But as we do this work, planning and then asking, do I actually want it? When we're in this space of do I actually want it, we start considering more than just the moment of eating it. We start considering the long-term effects of having eaten that. And I mean long-term, I mean like acute effects of having eaten that food. So for instance, when we eat Taco Bell or we eat steak or we eat cookies, too many cookies or whatever, what is that feeling in our body? What is our energy level like the next day? What's it like for the next week when we're trying to get rid of the salt of what we've eaten and whatever? So we start to realize that this sentence is not 100% true. The sentence is more like, I love the taste of Taco Bell, but I really don't like how I feel afterwards. When you truly believe that sentence, you will eat less of it, right? Because you're starting to actually believe some negative about it rather than just all the positive. Same with cookies. Like, cookies are awesome when I first eat them, but I don't like the sluggish way that I feel an hour or so later. I don't like my digestion. It gets kind of funky. I don't like, the fact that cookies make me want to have more cookies because they're just so delicious. I don't like how that feels. I don't like maybe the next day when I don't feel as good at energy, whatever. So then the sentence is not "I love cookies." The sentence is, I love the taste and the feeling of having cookies. I love that immediate pleasure, but I don't love the after effects of cookies. Even from that place of belief, we're going to eat a little bit less cookies, right? So this is actually the way out of binging and any kind of overeating, emotional eating. We start here, okay? The next thing we want to look at, which we're not going to talk about today, but it's really important, is to be working on quantities too, okay? So not just I can have as many cookies as I want, but how many should I have, right? How many feels good to me? Like, do I actually want them? And do I actually want the same quantity that I had last time, which might be 1 cookie or 2 cookies, right? As we start working on changing our thoughts about stuff and changing the quantities of stuff, this all naturally takes care of itself, insulin issues or not. And I'm pre-diabetic, or I was pre-diabetic, so I know exactly what it feels like to have extra cravings because of glucose and insulin and things like that. It's not as bad as we're thinking. They play it up way more than it needs to be played up. And if we want this to be done permanently, here's what we have to look at, okay? Okay, let me see, Darlene. Then eat your healthy fats and then your junky food after for dessert in a smaller amount. Yep, exactly, right? You start to plan things on purpose. I can have it, and I actually feel better when I have it at the end of my meal, right? I actually don't feel as shaky. I don't get a bigger sugar crash, etc. Oatmeal spikes your glucose levels, getting you out of control. I disagree, Darlene. You're not going to get out of control. Out of control comes from your brain. It doesn't come from glucose. It is the combination, and it's mainly the thought one. It's the beliefs. I am a binge eater, or I can't control myself if I feel shaky. That's the issue here. If we felt, doesn't matter if I get shaky or not, I'm not going to eat things that make me feel poorly, right? Or if I'm shaky, I can't stop, or I need to have this, or this. Like, for instance, if I were to eat donuts on an empty stomach, it wouldn't feel good, but it'd be very simple for me at this point to stop. And I would nowadays, I automatically would never have donuts on an empty stomach because I just don't like the feeling. So it's about, yes, of course, those things spike your insulin. Of course they do. But the spike of the insulin is not what makes you act. It's what you're thinking, like, ooh, I have to have more, or I can't control myself. Imagine someone who's always been thin, and not because of high metabolism, but because they have, and this is obviously clearly a very small portion of the population, but the folks that they can eat these types of foods and still remain in control. And that's the control that we can create. So no matter what, whether we had sugar on an empty stomach, or we had a nice big salad and then some sugar, we can still control this with the power of our thoughts, okay? You mentioned to check out Glucose Goddess. I don't really like her. I like some of her stuff. I just think she plays it up too much. I do know about her. And yes, of course, we can learn to make sweet desserts that are much healthier. But this is not what I'm talking about, Darlene. I'm talking about folks who are already in the Taco Bell area, not in the ready for healthier desserts area, right? We got to start where we are, and that's where the realistic planning comes in, okay? I disagree. The spike of your insulin and glucose makes you crazy and ruins the beginning of your day and the rest of the day. Yeah, I just know from experience coaching so many people and myself that it's in what you're thinking about the glucose spike that's actually the issue. You have full control over this, and the more that you practice this, the better this will get, the easier this will get, and the more you're not giving enough credit to your prefrontal cortex, right? Because sure, we have biological things that happen all the time, but like, for instance, let's say you had a really, really hard day at work and you were exhausted and you were laying down on the couch thinking, gosh, I just can't even move. I'm so tired. I don't want to make a salad or whatever. And then there was a fire in the kitchen. Well, your body would find the energy and the adrenaline and the hormones would kick in to get you to move, right? And you'd put out that fire. You wouldn't say, oh, I'm too tired to do it. You would just be like, yep, we got to go. And that's a signal from your brain. That's a thought. Oh my gosh, we have to take care of this emergency. Or if it was the same thing, like you're super exhausted and then your friend shows up at the front door. You might not be real excited about getting up to have to hang out with friend, but they're at your door. So you have to change. Your body has all those energy reserves all the time for you to be able to make different choices. So even if you're feeling a little, like, as you say, crazy or shaky or whatever from glucose, that doesn't mean that we have to eat, that we have to change anything. We can go and eat something that's going to make us feel better. We can stop eating the cookies. We have full control all the time over our extremities, right? No matter what's going on with our glucose inside of our body. So you say, I've already tried using my mind, like you say, and never stopped me for many years. Well, respectfully, you're not my private client, right? So when you see a few tips from me on live videos and stuff, that's great and stuff, but that's not how we actually do it in private coaching. And this is why I have like 100% success rate with private clients, because we got to really get in there to your specific issues, right? Yeah, Lori, I hear you. I need this so badly. Binge, then good, then binge. That's where I'm back to. I know. It's rough, right? Lori, if you just got here, watch the first part of this video, because this is where we start, okay? And it's so important for us to become more empowered with our thoughts. We want to move back, like I was showing you that little graph of empowerment. We want to get back to where we started as toddlers. Like I watch my 4-year-olds and my 6-year-old even, and they'll have a piece of cake in front of them. And it could be the only thing they ate, for dinner or whatever, because it's a birthday or something. And they will still stop in the middle of the piece of cake and just be like, I don't want any more. They'll have soda, they'll have these kinds of things, and they can just get to this point where they don't care. So yeah, they might have glucose spikes and things like that, but their prefrontal cortex is overriding those things. And they're more in touch with those thoughts and feelings. And when we are more in touch with that, and we've practiced using the prefrontal cortex enough, this stuff becomes, for lack of a better term, a piece of cake. Okay. Right. But it's the same example. So you said that's the flight or flight. That's not average every normal life. Well, we can use the same example of what I said, which is, let's say you are in that same emotional state where you're exhausted and tired and you just don't want to get up, and your friend appears at the door, right? That's not fight or flight. It's the same exact thing. If that friend shows up, you might not want to like hang out with them, but you're going to find the energy to do that. And that's not fight or flight. That's just a thought switch of, oh, they're here. I guess I gotta pick it up. Right. And what's the crisis is over the stress of the tension. The first thing I used to do is eat junk food to change my mood before I learned to food sequence recently. Yeah. So what you're doing there is you're food sequencing in order to make this work. And that's a great step to use. It's a tool to use. But if it doesn't work in all occasions and we're not we're still binging or still overeating in some places, then it means we still got a lot of ability in the brain to be able to control this stuff. Well, it is 100% success rate. Every client I work with feels completely empowered at the end and knows what they got to keep doing and keep working on it. Yeah, I know. I just get the feeling that you're arguing with me so much about my experience, and I know what my experience is. I've done it with many clients, but you haven't hired me as a private coach. And I'm not saying you're not extremely educated. I'm saying you haven't done my method before. That's all. And also, when you say, I listen to doctors every day who specialize in compulsive and addictive eating, I can't tell you how many clients have come to me after years and years of binging and overeating, and then they fix that stuff with me. The important part is that we have to have done it ourselves, right? We have to have the actual experience ourselves to overcome these things. And how many doctors do we know that have a nice psych degree, but haven't really ever done it themselves? I don't know how many clients have come to me after years and years of therapy And no one ever was able to touch this stuff because it has to be created by somebody who's actually overcome it. Okay. Yeah, it's true. I know I have PCOS too. It's so much more difficult to lose weight when you have PCOS. Lately, having strong thoughts from my previous eating disorders. I hear you, Marilyn. I just like to offer that it is this thought work that actually is going to make you strong enough to be able to even get through PCOS. Like what we want to do, Dr. Furman's wife healed herself from PCOS using nutritarian food. So what this means is that we can get rid of these things with proper nutrition, but in order to get proper nutrition enough, we have to use the thought work to get there. Okay, we've got to actually strengthen that mind. Okay, so here's the tips that I have about fast food. We start there, and I guarantee you over time of changing your thoughts about it, becoming someone who doesn't feel triggered by these foods anymore. I mean, can you imagine actually going to some party where all those foods are there and not feeling triggered at all? The way that we do that, and I always do this with clients, the way we do that is by making it okay to have the foods, right? Now, we don't want to like go overboard and this is all we eat for the rest of our life, but we actually don't want to control it in the beginning. We want to plan it. We want to say we can, and then we want to start working on quantities. Okay, once we've gotten past the can't and shouldn't, that creates a lot of white knuckling and things like that. Once we get past that can't and shouldn't, the whole thing feels so much more peaceful. And when we're eating foods from a place of peace, meaning I can have it, I want it, and I can have it, it's so easy to plan quantities at that point. So let's say we go to a party and they've got this whole spread of stuff that we haven't seen for a long time. Some of the work that we would do is also working on hunger to make sure when we go to a party like this, we're not starved when we get there, right? Sort of common sense stuff, but practicing it enough, going to enough parties, which is why I usually work with people for 4 to 6 months, going to enough parties so that they feel empowered after that and going, oh, I can have that food, but do I really want it? From do I really want it? The next place that we go, you guys, when we're feeling empowered this is the best part to be, the best place to be, and this is the last step, is I get to eat to live. This is how you go from I'm a binger, I can't, I'm having trouble, to I get to eat to live. Okay. You always wonder those people who say, like Dr. Furman or whatever, those people who say food is fuel, or they just have these beliefs about food, right? That's where we can get, but we can't just jump there. Most people will say, well, you've got to eat to live to settle that stuff down. That's not true. And I know this too, because I've worked with so many people who started off and they didn't even want to do eat to live. And I was the same way after my twin pregnancy. I didn't want a salad. I didn't want any vegetables. So how do you do this even from that place of not wanting any of this stuff? This is where we start. Okay. And it will automatically get better over time to the point where by the end of it, we're actually choosing these foods on purpose. Like me now, I crave salads for lunch. I just want salads. I love, actually, this is very opposite than what I used to feel, which is I wanted volume. I needed to feel full. All these diets are telling me to get so much volume. I actually prefer a medium-sized salad nowadays. I mean, it's very different from my videos 6 or 7 years ago, right? Where I would stuff myself, which was just perpetuating ideas about binging and things. Now I like to have a smaller quantity of food, which is honestly what I always wished for, right? I always wished to be one of those people who would have a small plate of food and be satisfied. And we can get there, okay? This is not necessarily true, Darlene. It's not true. I mean, sometimes some people might do that, but that person is there long enough. And well, I don't really want to argue. Lori says, I love the toddler brain thought. That made me giggle, but I love the practice of that. You're welcome. Yeah. And it's true. I mean, I watch my girls and they think first about what the feeling is in their body, right? I asked my daughter one time, what do you think? Like when one time she pushed away something that I wouldn't have pushed away. And I said, what did you think when you did that? Like, why did you do that? And she said, well, when I was eating, all of a sudden there was something that just said stop. So I stopped. And I was like, yeah, that's it right there, right? And also when we have been practicing for so long, listening to the loud craving voice, and not the quiet prefrontal cortex, we will have missed those signals the whole time. But anyone who starts doing this work will realize, and this is the second step in my program, is to put you in touch with your hunger and satiety signals. When you get really good at listening for those and then actually responding to them, which is all the thought and feeling work that we do, when you get better at responding to that stuff and you practice it and practice it and practice it, all of a sudden you just only really listen to that louder voice. And that's how we were when we were younger. It's how we were born. It's like when, so I have identical twins and I watched them. One has a large appetite and one has a very small appetite. So I watched the one with the small appetite, and she would have a signal to just stop in the middle of a bottle she didn't want anymore. And she still to this day will do that, where she just stops when she doesn't want anymore. And my daughter with a larger appetite, she wants more food, but she has her stopping point in every meal too. Every single time, whether it's cake, ice cream, whatever. I mean, we had a birthday party at grandmother's house a few weeks back, and they all had cake in front of them, and every single one of them, whatever their appetite is, they stopped at a certain point and were just like, I don't want anymore. And that's how we all start. And that's how we all have the ability to get back there at some point and recreate that strength, listening to those signals up here that come from here that say, oh, I've had enough. This is where we stop. And we can become really good at doing that. Okay. Okay. So yeah, Darlene, I know. I mean, it's tough because, we can just agree to disagree on this stuff, and that's fine. I don't think it goes any deeper than the mind work. I think that's the deepest we can go. The thoughts and the feelings, those are I've worked with people who thought it was their childhood issues, who've had very tough childhood issues and things like this. It's not that. That's not the problem. The problem is how we react right now when we're having a craving, right? And if we can get that worked out, we're going to be good. Marilyn, I know the only way that I have lost large amounts of weight in the past was by starving myself. I know, because that it's sad, but that's really the type of advice that we're given is eat this specific thing, make this very specific decision, only eat this, like keto, eat to live, even all these kinds of, you have to eat specifically this way. Now, Marilyn, I'll kind of give you understanding of what's happening here. So the thought model that I use in my coaching, it's not mine, and the woman who taught it to me, it's not hers either. It's been something that's around for thousands of years. What we say is that our thoughts create our feelings, and we act from our feelings, actions, and then habits, the more we repeat those, right? Feelings, emotions. So when we're tired, we're going to want to have some snack foods. Oh, I'm so tired. I don't feel like making a salad or whatever. If we were able to get in there and change those thoughts in that moment, we go, oh, I'm so tired. I just want a cookie. If we were able to actually know how to interrupt that process and go, that's silly. Just because I'm tired doesn't mean I need a cookie, right? That's the thought shift there. And that's possible for all of us. The more we practice that, the easier and more automatic it gets. Okay. So we say that our thoughts create our feelings, and our feelings are what drive our actions. So if we want to be eating better, we need to work on this stuff. Okay. Now, this is not new. This is like stoicism. This is, think and grow rich. These ideas have been around for millennia. But specifically, this is comes from a form of psychology called REBT, which is rational emotive behavioral therapy, which is big in the 50s and 60s by a psychologist named Albert Ellis. And I just love this methodology because, and I've worked with psychologists as well and therapists who realize that this part here is the biggest part. This is the feelings and emotions are going to be what actually drive those actions. Okay. And we know that for a fact. When we're feeling scared, fight or flight. When we're feeling, and many of these things are automatic because they're automatic ingrained patterns, right? When we're feeling tired and worn out, we're going to overeat. When we're feeling disempowered and bingy. It could be an emotion, and it could also be a sensation in the body, like hunger or things like that, right? So if we want to actually change our actions and habits, we need to work on our thoughts and emotions in the moment, right? But here's what's interesting. In Marilyn, this is what you're talking about. True, Marilyn, exactly. So I've heard that some people overeat because they're emotionally hungry for affection. Yeah, you'll hear a lot of people talk about when we talk about emotional eating, right? The link between emotions and eating, and that is totally true. A lot of people will say that cravings come from a biological need, like, oh, you need more magnesium, or your insulin is spiking, or things like that. I don't buy any of that stuff. It really comes down to, and what we're talking about, this is kind of a dirty word, but discipline. We're talking about how do we become disciplined. Now, if you think of somebody who's very disciplined with food, they have a very calm, stoic kind of way about food. They don't mix food with emotions, right? This is something that's taught and natural for some people, but it can be taught and become our natural way of operating no matter what's going on in our life, right? And so if you say someone is emotionally hungry for affection, sure. What we want to do is actually divorce hunger from emotions, right? We want to get it so those things are separate, so they don't affect each other anymore. And how do we make these decisions consistently and repeatedly so that they become habits and they become automatic over time? It's by working on the thoughts in the moment we're having them. So for instance, you're saying someone that's emotionally hungry for affection. Okay, yeah, sure. However, it's fixable. So let's say this person is emotionally, maybe they're lonely. I've worked with lots of folks who are, lonely for whatever reason. What has happened as we, similar when I was talking about my children who are quite young, 4 and 6, and they haven't gotten to the point where they've practiced enough putting together food with emotions, which is what causes it to be automatic after a while. And this is why people think that they're a binge eater, or they think that they're addicted, or they think that this or that. It's because over time they have just practiced it so much, and they've actually put food together with their emotions. So over time, it's just like Pavlov's dog. When you say, if the bell rings, the dog is going to salivate. It's the same thing. When I'm feeling lonely, I'm going to eat to try to fix it. Now, what we do in coaching is that we separate all that and we make sure that that's not a problem anymore, and we just get better and better and better at it. I always work with people for 4 to 6 months to make sure that this stuff sticks, and to make sure that we have enough events come up in our life that we can actually work on those things and make some muscle memory. And once we have that muscle memory and working on our feelings and emotions in any situation, and we can bring ourselves back to calm, like look at the difference here. So let's say we're coming from a place of loneliness. And our thought is, I'm really lonely, and so I'm going to eat. Like I want to eat for a treat. I need some comfort. I want to make myself feel better. That's a thought that creates this situation here, which is going to end up being emotional eating. Okay. Now there's lots of different reasons why someone would eat for an emotion. It could be the tired thing. It could be the exhausted thing. It could be this or that. If we can teach the person to stop that pattern in its tracks while it's happening, we just practice and practice and practice that, then we can get out of that. Okay, so we work on going from whatever that automatic emotion is, which we can't change our emotions. Those are like the automatic one. But what we can do after that is we can we can choose the next one. Does that make sense? So if we say, oh, the first emotion that I had was lonely. Now I'm feeling, I was feeling lonely because of this, and I really wanted to eat. But you know what? I really don't like how I could eat. I could have those foods if I wanted. I mean, I have done that many times, but I know that's not going to fix my loneliness. So I'm just going to be lonely and work through that right now. That's going to bring us to more calm. Okay, so let's say we started off lonely, Marilyn, and we brought ourselves to calm in that situation before we ate. Now, from a place of calm, we have more time in our brain to think it through. We have more time in our brain to have that conversation with ourselves. Like, you know what? pizza's not going to fix this right now. And I actually don't like how I feel when I binge on pizza. So I'm just going to be lonely, right? It's okay to be lonely. This is the kind of stuff that we practice and make sure that this sticks for you so that when you're coming from calm, you'll actually make better choices. Now, what most people have a problem with, so what you're saying, Marilyn, is the only way that I've lost large amounts of weight in the past was by starving yourself. So what you did, which is very common, is you started here trying to just change your actions, just eat less. Right? So starting from here, we call this starting in the action line. It's never permanent because we still have those thoughts and feelings that come up, right? So for instance, let's say we starve ourselves for a while, and for sure, like, you're going to lose weight if you starve yourself, but it's not going to be a permanent solution because you haven't dealt with the thoughts and feelings that actually make you overeat routinely, right? So over time, when you have worked on thoughts and feelings and gotten to the place where there's just calm when it comes to food and those things are separated, right? You end up making choices that are better because you have more time to think about it. You feel more calm. You don't feel so, and you might even feel low blood sugar. You might even feel shaky, irritable, whatever, but you can still make good decisions from that place. Does that make sense? As long as we have practiced this and gotten good at bringing ourselves back to calm. Okay, so that's it for today. That is how we can actually, if you want, continue to eat fast food and end your binge eating. I guarantee this works. It's worked for so many people that actually thought that they were beyond hope, that they couldn't do this. And everyone is always so surprised at the fact that they could. I personally was surprised as well when I started doing this work and realizing that I've always had so much more power than I thought I did. And I felt like, man, I wish I would have learned this stuff in my 20s because it sure works. It works like gangbusters, and it can erase decades of overeating and binging. And, you know, my binging history is binging to the point of throwing up at least once a month. Not like bulimia throwing up, but like ate so much my body couldn't handle it and automatically threw it up, kind of a thing. And, you know, then just regular binges 2-3 times a week for many, many years. And I don't do that ever anymore. I don't remember the last time I threw up from eating. And what we really want, you guys, if the solution doesn't create calm and peace around food, it's not going to be long-term. And what I'm talking about is calm and peace, right? Imagine being somebody who's calm and peaceful about food going forward. That's really the goal. Okay. So, that's it. Do you guys have any questions, have any thoughts? That's all I have for today. I'm going to sign off unless you have any questions, and we'll just keep doing this as the weeks go by. I'm going to be putting up the website as soon as possible, and we'll put up the podcast as soon as we can get it to launch. We've just been having some issues with Apple, which is frustrating because, man, I wish we would have been done by now, but it is what it is. Okay, so I guess no questions. I'm so glad that you guys were here. I appreciate you so much. Thank you for showing up and having some cool discussion with me. And I'll see you next week again. Okay, talk to you soon. Bye.